All right, guys, we are on first episode of Road Doggin, giving this a shot. We just got the studio set up, everything's squared away, and I'm going to act like I actually know what I'm doing here. As you can see, I've already got my first guest, Eric Thomason, #pro. What's up, dog?
What's up? Congrats on the studio and the road dogging.
I am excited. This is a long time coming of playing around with and trying to figure out how I was going to make my mark and try to leave something more than just fishing tournaments. I this is something I've thought about for quite a while, and this really didn't kind of take hold and something that I was really serious about until I had a conversation with Jody Queen in Alabama, and me and Jody were talking about how we were gonna, kind of do more than just fish tournaments. What was Jody was talking about his legacy in kayak fishing, and I want thought about, hey, what's my legacy going to be? So I started talking to Jeff and Lambert, and road dogging was born.
Well,
So
the great thing about about the community and what you've done and what you'll do in the future is you've got a tremendous amount of really interesting people. So as far as airtime and guests and content and topics, I mean, it's kind of endless. You've got a fan base of fishermen that are starting or just getting into it and looking at you for motivation and advice and things like that, and then you've got the respect of the upper echelon community, whether it's um, you know um, Russ or Drew Gregory or Christine or Jody or whomever that may be. Your name is right up there with those folks. So I think the opportunity for you to have some fun instead of being on the other end of getting interviewed after you've done well in events, which you've had your lion's share of that, and I've had a little bit of that over the over the course of the years. So um, I hadn't performed up to my standard the last season, but that's fishing.
that's
I'm
that's part of it. You're right,
I'm
but
playing a little bit more golf than I did the last couple of fishing seasons. So
I,
I'll use
I,
that
I
as
don't
an excuse.
I don't know the last time I played golf when we weren't together. You seem to be the person that gets me out and playing golf. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my relief from fishing when fishing gets a little bit too serious, and I start having those #bullshad meltdowns, and gotta kind of get my mind off fishing a little bit. So, but you hit it right on the head. That's kind of the goal of road dog, and I've talked about that with KBN and some other stuff I've done of what the purpose and why I thought this would be something that would be beneficial to kayak fishing and KBN and all of that is just you know this is my 10th year since I started fishing tournaments, kayak tournaments alone. So I've seen a lot. I've I've experienced a lot. I try to be the person that fishes as many kayak tournaments as anybody every year. There's been a couple of years where I've had 50 tournaments and a lot of years where I've had 40 tournaments. And, this is going to be another one of those years where I'm going to try to hit 50. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it, but I had a very good start at the start of the season, had 30 events in the first 24 weeks or whatever. So, um, I feel like I've just got, I feel like I have the knowledge and experience at this point to comfortably put something together to where if I was not the one recording this, I would be like, you know what, so and so is doing a podcast. Let's listen to it. So I finally feel like, I know that's the way I treat YouTube. Is like I go on YouTube and it's like I've never heard of this person. I don't really, and everybody can learn from everybody, but there's something to be said about, oh, there's so and so. G Man has a YouTube. Let's go on there and see what he has to say about throwing a buzz bait around. So, that's kind of the way I looked at it. If I fished enough and did enough, then this would come, a lot more naturally, and I could, it made more sense to me to do it now versus 5 years ago.
Well, I think you got to look at two things. You've got relevance. You're very relevant within the community from a performance perspective, but you also got, from my short stint in this, which is about 8 years now, you've got, some local guys that we know that have had successful YouTube channels, Kayak Catfish in particular. And, you look at, well, what makes them successful? And it's the entertainment value. It's not necessarily how good you are at what you're doing, but it's, are you entertaining? And give him credit. There's certainly relevant educational things within his channel that I think fishermen are looking for. But I think, you've got a group of people that are like, here's a 10 or 12 year old kid. Hey, go watch catfish while I'm getting dinner ready, and you got a 30-minute break from the kid yelling at you what's for dinner. So I think you've got both those going for you, and you've been on his videos as well, at times, and it's fun, because people think we're entertaining, that we're just really fishing and being ourselves, which is you kind of wonder about it, but
It is a whole new ball game to do something live like that with somebody that has a following for entertainment value. Because if we go live, it's a handful of people that I know personally and that I fish against or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, let's see what Jordan's up to. He don't go live a whole lot. Let's figure out what he's doing. And then you go hang out with Kayak Catfish, where they're basically like, oh, it's almost 6 o'clock. I bet Justin's gonna go live. And as soon as you get on there, there's people sending them money just to
oh yeah,
do random things, and just the most random things you've ever seen, period. And it's fun because it doesn't seem it's not the norm to just go live and there be a bunch of people see you and just want you to do stuff. Like, I could see the thrill in that, and the I don't know what you would call it, the entertainment value of it.
yeah. It's funny. You look and there's 500 plus people in that live chat, and then as pro moderator, I'm trying to determine who's talking to us, who's talking to each other, what's relevant, and then you got people that are saying stuff that's inappropriate, and you're blocking them so they can't say anything else. And I mean, you really have to pay attention. And I don't care how good you are, you just it's rapid fire, and you miss stuff, as you're trying to manage that situation. But this is a little different because you can kind of pace it in the manner that you want to pace it. You can come and kind of have a carte blanche session, which is kind of what we're doing, where we're just kind of talking about whatever we want to talk about. Or you can have a set agenda of what you want to talk about, especially if you've got a guest that is really good at a specific technique, or just hey, tell us the five or six funniest stories that's happened to you this year, on the road, whether it's tournament related or non-tournament related. And I mean, that's there's always some drama in this bunch. So
We will definitely get into that at some point, because like I said, obviously the reason Eric is my first guest on Road Dog, and for those that don't know, we have spent a lot of time on the road together. We have went to Texas, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Canada, New York. Um, we've been a lot of places and had a lot of fun, and had just a lot of, honestly, there's probably not a better way to say it, but other than just a lot of random things happen. It's road dog things, as I like to call them. It's not normal. It's just things that happen. And I want to cover a couple stories specifically. I'm sure Eric's probably got some that he wants to say as well. But first off, I want to appreciate you coming on here. Obviously there's nobody I'd appreciate more being the first guest, and the actual person that kind of gave me the road dog nickname from driving around and sleeping in my truck. So I appreciate you for coming on here. And I appreciate Jeff and Ryan for getting me squared away, getting me set up with the system here. And appreciate my mom and dad for helping me insulate this hole. Yeah, my murder shed, as some people have delightfully called it. It looks a lot nicer than a murder shed now. Y'all can't see, but this is nice. We got insulation. We're not just sweating in here and just not trying to die in the southern heat in a little shed. And we're nice. We're moving on up in the world. the joke at work is we like to call it high class white trash. So we moving on up. So there's a lot of people I need to thank for all of that. And you guys,
It looks like it could be the boom boom room at the Savoy.
oh gosh, that so here's a road dog story. So me and Eric have been watching Banshee, and it's a pretty good show. It's I don't even know, HBO, I guess, is the app we've been watching it. We watched Netflix and HBO and Hulu and golf. And Eric has an iPad and he throws it up there on the console. We move, enough where cup holders are. We throw an iPad up there and just cruise down the road. And the next thing you know, you just finished a 14-hour drive and you're not really that tired. So driving all night, it's the way to go. It is professional way to go. So that's one of our road dog pro tips. We're gonna start doing road dog tips and road dog reviews. Y'all know I love eating at all these crazy places when I'm out of town. We're gonna have road dog food reviews since everybody seemed to love that when I was in Sweden, of me just randomly talking about the crap that I was eating when I was over there, which blew my mind. That seemed to be what people just made the most comments about, even while I was over there. Those pictures on Facebook just had the most traction. And when I got back, I still somebody's like, oh, you going anywhere soon? And Sweden gets brought up, of course, because I can't shut up talking about it, because that's just kind of how that goes. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing what you were posting, what you were eating over there. And I'm like, they didn't see the pike I caught, they didn't see all the big team pictures or anything. They just saw what I was posting while I was eating. So I guess that's the one thing that kind of ties us all together is eating things. So road dog reviews on some random eateries. Y'all know I like to get ice cream, and Eric is our pro chef when we're out of town. He's our Saturday night steak night uh, professional cook. He's our Bobby. What is it? Bobby
Flay.
Flay.
Yeah.
Bobby Flay. Eric's our Bobby Flay when we're out of town. Him and Pro Neighbor. Pro Neighbor always ends up making something weird though. It's good, but it's got Pro Neighbor's fingers all over. You know what I mean? Eric's laughing because he knows what I mean. Y'all don't know what I mean. Pro Neighbor will bring us. We'll have some nice steaks, and they, like I said, they taste fantastic. But Pro Neighbor will be like putting Asian zing and putting a little flavor on them. You know, I just like a piece of meat, man. Cooked it and grilled, slap it on a plate. We throw down. I Pro Neighbor one time at his rental house at Chickamauga, hyped me up. We were having steaks, and he made these steaks. I wasn't paying attention. I was getting stuff ready after day one, and I go in there and sit down at the table, and he's like, "All right, here's your steak," and it was one of those from Butler and Bailey, those little hamburgers that were steak hamburgers that were ground up that he had been calling steaks all day. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, dog, I said, you're killing me. I said, I was expecting one of them big old steaks like Eric brings all the time. You done cornhole me, got me mouth watering. I end up with a 6-ounce hamburger patty that's been grilled like a steak. I ate a little extra salad that night. I was all tore up.
Yeah, we don't skimp. We're prime. We're wagyu. When what's the cat's name that came to South Carolina with us that brought those amazing steaks that were so
Oh my
good?
goodness! Shout out Paul Roberts with
Paul Roberts. Yes. Oh my God.
Bass and Brews. I think is the name, Bass Kayak and Brews. Oh, he's gonna be mad at me that I can't think of the
Yeah.
name of that. He just texted me and
It's not
asked.
Bass and Brews, but it's something along those lines. But I mean, he had a buddy that has a farm and brought straight up legit cowboy ribeye steaks with the rib in the steaks, and I think each one of them weighed nearly 2 pounds apiece. I mean, one of the better steaks I've had. And then the next day, I couldn't finish mine, and I put it in a wrap for lunch, and that's probably one of the best on the water lunches I've ever had in my fishing career. Was eating that leftover steak in a wrap. It was just fantastic. But
That was one of the absolute best meals, and I don't know if you remember or not, but we almost burnt that rental house
I,
down.
well, there was yeah, we had a little issue with maybe some smoke damage. We took the fire detector off the wall because they didn't have a grill, and so I had to utilize the stovetop cast iron oven method. And sometimes them things smoke up, and we had 40 knot. We probably had 40-mile-an-hour winds running through the house because we opened all the doors. And yeah, we got accused of damaging that house. They tried to keep our security deposit and charge us a little bit more, but I had a conversation with the fine folks at the Evolve, and let them know that if they didn't pay me back, I was going to drive to South Carolina and have a discussion with the owner. So we got
The Evolve is not our favorite places to employ lodging from, to say the
no.
least.
I would highly support VRBO straight up. Evolve is a little bit of a train wreck, but
Or better yet, find you somebody when you go to these places and book it. Book the place, and then if you like the place, just try to get their phone number and hit them up. Like
helps
Daniel
everybody.
has.
Yeah,
Yeah, it helps everybody. So that's our pro recommendation number 2. We're just slinging knowledge out here on
that's right.
Road Dog and episode 1. So we'll hop right into this. What how do you think the season has went so far? What's your review of the year so far? I know you mentioned you haven't had the most ideal year yourself. You're kind of teetering on the TOC qualification. I believe you might slide in there, but you don't have to talk about your own fishing events, but just what do you think of the year so far? We've had kind of an interesting year in kayak fishing in general.
It's interesting to have been around long enough to see it evolve from the grassroots to the regional type stuff to the national type stuff. You know, I think obviously I've been very kind of partial to Hobie BOS. I would say they did a lot of things right when they made some of the changes that they did, and I think they made some things worse. And I think they realize it, and they've tried to kind of salvage it. You know, I think it's almost so saturated that there's too many tournaments. It used to be there wasn't enough, and now there's too many. It's just like we were talking. I don't have anything, really planned this weekend. And you're like, well, I'm going to either fish down at Gunnersville at the Big Bass deal, or I'm going to go and fish, up there with those guys in Tri City. So you had two options that are, pretty much local for you, somebody that doesn't mind driving a couple hours to fish. Um, you know, Historically, I liked having that break from, October, November to February, March to not fish. And obviously, a lot of the guys that fish hunt, they could do their hunting and all that stuff. I don't really hunt, and I do fish all year, but to feel like you have to, you know, fish tournaments to, for me, it's almost like a shoe in that I'm going to qualify for state, every year with 10 cat, not tooting my own horn, but like this year I didn't fish all the events because I was traveling fishing national events, and I just kind of snuck in. I had a win and a second, and you typically, if you've got a win and a second in your local club, you're not going to have any issues getting in. But, the good thing about the quality of fishermen, I think, has gotten way better over the years. I think, the bad thing is when you look at the season as a whole, you know, probably the most bizarre event for me of all of the events was Harris Chain. Go down there, have probably one of the better practices I've ever had, doing something I'm really good at, and I went Saturday 8 hours and didn't get a bite.
And what was weird about that is you were around a lot of guys that
That
that, that
caught
caught
fish,
limits
yeah,
and had solid limits and
yeah.
um
Christine launched with me, Guillermo launched with me, Sisto launched with me, and Pro Neighbor launched with me, and they all were top 20 after day one, and I
I
didn't get
mean
a
you
bite.
You weren't like right beside anybody that caught like 108 inches or anything that first day, but you were around people that caught fish.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can remember, so my dog was sick, and I was dealing with that, and but I'm still competing and fishing hard. And of course, there was, I think, a 30 or 40 boat tournament came out of that same ramp. And you know how that place is. You're in these grass channels. We call it dicking around in the weeds, so to speak. So I'm dicking around in the weeds, trying to catch fish. And I come across a blind spot, and there's a bass boat there. Now, we got 27 pounds on this black and blue Cinco, and I ain't caught a damn fish. I was like, good job, guys. I continued my 8 hours of casting with no fish. So,
And that was the first event of the year too. That was, you mentioned, oh, they told you black and blue Cinco, and at that point, first event of the year, everybody was being so strict on the information rules that you couldn't just go throw a black and blue Cinco or whatever else, because everybody was, so uptight about that. And since
well,
that's been changed,
well,
but
that was
a little bit.
that was unsolicited. That was, two guys competing in a bass boat. I just being polite, saying, hey, how you guys
Yeah.
doing? Hey, we got 27 pounds on black blue Cinco. And I'm like, well, I got no bites on nothing I've thrown, but yeah, that was interesting. But, the flip side of that is, we both kind of decided to make that a 1 day event, and we got to play golf with, a buddy of mine on Sunday down there in Orlando area at a nice golf course. So, the moral of the
I
story,
golfed like I fished that day.
I didn't play particularly well that day, but I've kind of gotten my old game back, and I'm playing much more consistent, this year. But I I think it just seems like it's gotten more difficult, for me anyway. And I'm not, I'm obviously not upper echelon like you, but I've had some success. Um, and it's live scope. It's guys making better decisions. It's, I think, depth of quality people in the field. And I think, it's interesting to me, the whole motor scenario. I'm anti motors in theory, but damn, I love my motor. I mean, I
Yeah.
went up the Holston River, Monday, because I just wanted to kind of knock the badness off the Wisconsin trip, and had a great day. Motored 4 or 5 miles upriver, and floated back down and caught two smallmouth over 20 inches and a 17 3/4 and a bunch of other 15 16ers, and you know. Love the fact that where we live, wanting to fish moving water, we can use those motors to fish by ourselves and go up and float down. Whereas typically that creates, I need somebody to pick me up, or we got to do a 2 car float, or you have to be particular about, what you decide to do. But I
Or get
hope
the old Uber if you're in a nice town like
that's
Knoxville.
right. That's right. My hope is that, Jordan knows me. I try to shoot straight. I believe there are two relevant trails in the country nationally. I think it's Bass now with what they've done, and Steve O, kudos to him, and Hobie. I don't really, count KBF as being relevant. Now I know that they get participation. Others would disagree with me, but that's just me. And I'm interested to see what happens next year, in respect to motors, because I've heard more than one angler, and quality anglers at that, make comments like, I'm not going to fish another event that doesn't allow motor because I've got a $2,000 or $3,000 setup in my trunk I can't use. And I never really looked at it that way, but that certainly, I think, is a very interesting topic. And I'm fortunate that I'm in a financial position to do this without putting a tremendous amount of thought in it. But I was just talking to my financial guy this morning. We had breakfast together, and we were talking about how expensive everything was just for everybody across the country. And I said, look, I spent on average $4 a gallon, 3 tanks up, 3 tanks down, just to go to Wisconsin. Not to mention entry fee, lodging, food. We had a little bit too much fun Friday night at the Milwaukee Burger Company. Um, you know, so, and I've even had this conversation with AJ and even Steve to say, look, these 2 day events that you have to travel for, you're $1,000 in before you step out the door. And, even if you go and you fish really well and you get a top 10, you might get enough to cover your trip, so it's
Yeah.
kind of it, I'd love to see a trail that had serious payouts that weren't legitimately redistributing entries. And I think we're still a ways away from that. And,
Yeah.
and honestly, it may never get to that point simply because, it's hard for sponsorships to monetize kayak fishing.
Yeah.
Because
I
I've always said this. I've had this conversation with guys, that locally that are super good fishermen that don't fish nationally. It's a hobby and it's
yeah.
secondary, and if you've got something planned, you just, like Matt Millard's a great example. He had vacation planned with his girlfriend and didn't fish, Mississippi River, and that's probably a perfect place for how he fishes and what he does to prepare for a tournament. He probably would have done really well up there, and
Yeah.
he's even considering maybe not going to TOC because he's probably going to be hunting during that time, which, that's totally his, decision. But it's,
Right.
you know, I I think for the vast majority of the general community, it is a hobby that has become something that you can take it just a little bit further. But with the exception of, a handful, say Christine and Drew and maybe Jody and Russ and Cody, and, I'm probably leaving somebody out, but, they've figured out a way to monetize this and do it, kind of for a living. But even with that being said, they're camping, they're living incredibly frugal.
Yeah.
They're not staying at VRBOs like we are. They're not eating out and doing fun stuff like we do, because this is kind of, we're taking our picks as to what we decide to participate in. But I do believe there's enough room for two trails. I wish that the grassroots guys, the national guys, and, the community would come together and consolidate rules where they're all the same rules, especially when it comes to the fish pictures. Because, my
Yeah.
goal is I want your fish to count. The hard part is
Yeah.
catching them. The picture critique shouldn't be, shouldn't be the difference maker for some. And I think that turns some people off, especially newer anglers, if something happens. So I wish they would
Right.
I wish they would unify the rules. And I know there's been some discussion about that. And I wish that, um, the national schedules would break quicker, so that the grassroots clubs could take those schedules and say, look, if we've got two or three guys that we want to participate in our local club that we know are probably going to try to travel, this particular trail, that we can schedule opposite weekends of those out of town tournaments so that these guys can participate locally. Because, that's where we all started, and that's important. And I think, and this, I mean, we fish a bare bones. I think guys are like, they're excited that you're in it and I'm in it, because they're competing against
Oh
guys
yeah.
that have
That's
done.
that's one of the more fun events, I've fished this year, is going and just throwing the Coosa on the trailer and just going and floating, and I don't have to worry about, batteries or motors or, anything, or fish depth finder, live scope. I don't have to do anything. I just go and throw a kayak in the truck and a handful of rods and just go fish. And what one thing, you mentioned the fish pictures, and I was victim of the fish picture cluster this year. And out of the 10 or 12 trails that I've probably taken part of in some way, shape, or form this year, I just happened to submit a fish picture in something that was legal 2 years ago in that trail, and wasn't legal this year. And it was kind of a discrepancy of interpretation of how that was, of how the rule was stated. Because I've done this long enough. I know why the rule was stated the way it was, and why the picture was that way. But it wasn't, it wasn't, the rule was not written in the sense of how I broke it, which is why, I took issue with it. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. But I would like to see things that make sense across the board. You would think by now that, you know, similar to weigh-ins with bass boats, I doubt there's very, very few differences in how you weigh a bass boat tournament when you get your fish in versus how, we have all these different ways to measure fish, whether pinch the tail, don't pinch the tail, you can touch any, around the mouth, but everybody knows you can't put your hand under the gill plate, don't cover the eye, that kind of things. But it's the little things like touching the tail, pinching the tail, hand past the anal fin. It's little things that can be consolidated more and more and more.
It's
And
to me, it's an easy fix, right? I mean, it's an easy fix. It doesn't take much agreement. I think the easiest fix is don't touch the fish. Does that make the picture a little bit more difficult? Probably. But does it take away so much of the other stuff? It takes it all away. Somebody has a question that they think somebody's caught the same fish twice. You've got the full fish, so you can see the specific markings on it. To me, that's pretty simple. But to your point, I think 2 weeks in a row, I think when you had your fish DQ'd, it popped me up from third to second. And then at another local event, guy didn't get back to the ramp on time and was disqualified, and I went from third to second. And of course, neither one of those situations was about catching the fish when you were supposed to catch it and how you're supposed to catch it. And that's what's most important is, okay, did you catch it in the within bounds? Did you catch it within time frame of the tournament? And did you catch it on artificial lure? And if the answers to those three questions are yes, it's almost kind of like, splitting hairs when it comes to, you know, exactly what was going on. And I know what you did, and I've never seen that before. I know it's legal in some trails and not in some. And, and I've had people call me like, hey man, after I've gotten the email, saying that my fish has been accepted, saying, hey, somebody else has looked at your fish, and do you have another picture of it? And I'm like, well, wait a second. Why'd you send me an email? Um, as many tournaments as I've fished in, you don't hear me complain about much. My expectation is my entry fee to that tournament makes me a customer of that event. And it's the directors and administration's responsibility, whether I do well or not, to give me a reasonable experience. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And I'm not super vocal about stuff like that, but certain things, it's like, wait a second here. The way I look at it, if you get an email from Tourney X saying your fish is accepted, that's it. There shouldn't be, a third or fourth or fifth or sixth set of eyes to say, oh, well, he's done this, or look at this, or maybe this is that, and all that kind of stuff. And I get that, you can make a mistake. I'm not saying that, there's not mistakes made when people are looking at fish, but
Well, Lambert had not a good example, probably a bad example in this situation of that happening, where he got a fish approved, and almost 8 full hours after he caught the fish, if I'm not mistaken, the fish gets DQ'd. He's already off the water, left. He left the event early, which is, people do different things. I leave early. It is what it is. We got a long drive. Lambert had something to do. He was driving back to the airport in Nashville for back from Kentucky Lake. So as soon as he got his limit, he left. He's like, all right, I got my TOC points. I got my limit. All right, time to go. And then he gets an email later. Hey, your fish is DQ'd. It's the one you caught the day before. And situations like that, it's like, those apps do a lot of things now. Like Tourney X is fantastic. Dwayne's done a great job with it, but you would think by now, as many things that pop up where you can't submit the same fish twice in the same day, how can you submit the same fish 2 days back to back and it doesn't catch it? Because that might keep him out of TOC, or that might keep somebody from getting a check. Things like that. Are specific to the kayak fishing community, and
well, like
just are
the deal,
weird. I mean, you don't know how
it
to
is
handle
weird.
those.
Well, the deal that was, talked about with Swindle's nephew, in the bass boat world, where, he was doing well, and then I think he was first or second boat, and their process was they checked boats 1 and 2 for insurance, and he didn't have the proper amount of insurance, so he gets disqualified. And they say, okay, well, it was a rule, and there's what, maybe 200 boats in that event, and the other 198 boats didn't get checked. You got to tell me that everybody was compliant. And my point to that is, when Pro Neighbor got fish disqualified for editing, he was moving the
Yeah,
frame
he was
fish.
turning a
Correct.
picture. So, a lot of
Yeah.
times, for those that don't know, we take pictures and sometimes they're sideways or upside
Upside
down.
down. Yeah.
He wasn't cropping them or anything. All he was doing was rotating them so it showed up on Tourney X correctly. And it was something that apparently he did for like a year or two, and it
Well,
never became an issue until
it
that
did.
specific event
Yeah.
because he edited them to turn them in the 30-minute window between lines out and last submission because he didn't have service and he was catching fish and did it in that little window, and they caught it and DQ'd it, which blows my mind still that
Well,
happened.
and to the reason I brought that situation up was just like the motorboat scenario where that some other people didn't probably have the proper amount of insurance but didn't get checked. I talked to Holly. Holly said she always edited her pictures when she fished an event. I talked to Justin Johnson. He always edited his picture for this event. And like me and Jordan, like we're just taking a picture. We don't care if it's upside down, left to right, right to left, whatever. As long as we got what we feel like is a good picture,
Yeah,
we're
I'm
happy,
full
done.
send,
Yeah,
out, backwards, flip flop, inside out. I start just sending them. I take like 30 pictures of every fish, and I just start sending them like taking off at NASCAR. They just start
yeah.
sending 100 mile an hour as soon as it goes.
And I think what you run into, and we run into this in a local tournament where, depending on the circumstances, they're not looking at all fish equally because somebody's out of contention and they're not going to get a check, but maybe they get 2 or 3 fish counted that they shouldn't have. And again, I'm not being critical of a mistake, but my thoughts are if you had unified rules from grassroots all the way to the nationals, just on the photo, then at least it's consistent throughout. No matter where you fish, you know what the expectation is, and then that is kind of more angler responsibility, which it's kind of
Oh
like
yeah,
wearing your life jacket. Why does that need to be a rule? That's just stupid in my mind.
yeah.
If you're going to be on the water, it's a dangerous situation at times. You need a life jacket, and I understand. And again, some of the
It's
safety.
one of those things to keep people from, I guess, suing
Right.
somebody in case somebody does
Sure.
something stupid. I get it, but
Yeah.
you shouldn't. You're right. You shouldn't have to have a rule. Hey, if you go out before dark, you should have a light.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're out in a kayak on Kentucky Lake in May or June or whatever lake or month you want to say, put a life jacket on. Like that. Like that's a simple thing. It's like put the seatbelt on when you get in your car. You
Yes.
shouldn't have to explain that. Like that's
Yeah.
a common sense kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think you've got some very good rules established. You've got some that to me fall under angler responsibility. I want to say there was a local trail that said they evolved to using motors, but wanted to require you to have a paddle. You know what I mean? That again. What I'm saying with, what are you going to do if this guy motors around all day, comes back safely, and catches a bunch of fish? You're going to disqualify him for not having a paddle.
For not having a backup transportation. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like and it's funny because everything has had this. Everybody's had something happen to them where you could argue that you broken the rules. What if you leave your kayak to go use the bathroom and you're not supposed to leave your kayak? That's technically against the rules. What if you've got a
hey,
flag?
you can get out of your kayak to use the bathroom as long as you're tethered.
Well, maybe, maybe
Tethered. You got
not.
to drag the kayak up the bank with you.
And then, the other one is, how many of those Vizio flags have I broke in my fishing career? I start the day with a flag and end the day with not a flag.
Those flags. If there's ever somebody, y'all have had to have seen that flag that I have. It's. I've got an American flag. I know a lot of people have seen the American flag that I've got behind me. That thing I've had for maybe 3 years because I never had one that worked properly for more than maybe 3 months, and I finally just started duct taping them together. mean, that thing's got zip ties holding the flag onto it. I've replaced that bulb a few times. I don't know how many sets of batteries I've went through, but the whole thing is just duct taped and zip tied together because those things are terrible. Is what it boils down to. I don't think that there is a single good
that
quality
that that
flag
rail
and light combo.
that Railblazer is as good as I know, because it's, it's, I don't know, 18, 20
You,
inches tall, and you're not breaking
you
it
know what
because
my problem with that thing is?
it doesn't
It
flex at
is
all, or
well, the attaching and detaching of it is terrible. That's a
I mean,
terrible
it's
design.
it's a little tiny button. I mean,
I can't get. Look at that. I got fat redneck fingers. I can't get in there. Look at that. My
yeah.
fat sausage fingers. I can't get in there. I every time I borrowed that from you, I think I borrowed your boat or something. I couldn't get it on and off. I just left it on there the whole time I borrowed your boat or
Well,
whatever
the
I did.
the
I couldn't get it.
the knock on that, I don't have an issue with detaching and detaching it. I think it's actually pretty clever. The problem with the light is once you turn it on, it is a absolute, to turn it off. It's got the little tiny button that you hit to turn it off. You hit it once and it starts flashing, and you hit it a second time and it turns it off. I mean, it's literally like, I mean, it's
Yeah,
probably an eighth inch long. It's never lined up where it's easy to get to, and it takes a severe amount of pressure to get it to actually turn the thing off.
yeah. I think the whole deal, the light hitting the little button and trying to get it on and off and detaching and hooking it up.
It's a better
I don't know.
option than the Vizio. Let's just go on record, which is not hard to
I
do.
just I wrap that thing up in duct tape, right? So you have all the individual parts. I got one part that's doubled at the bottom. It's duct taped. I got the flag zip tied to the pole, and the top is duct taped to hold the little pail, kind of bulb cover on. And I just fold all that up and then just shove it down in my black pack rod tube. And that's the best way I've found. And of course, luckily for me, the pole is not perfectly straight because it's seen a bullshad meltdown or two over the years, so it's kind of crooked, and it stays out of the way perfectly. I just put it in the side, it leans over to the back, so the light's right behind my head. It don't bother my vision in the morning. It keeps me nice and safe. But it
Yeah,
is bright. I will give it that. It is
the,
bright.
well, and I guess the one thing is for whatever reason where they're strict on certain things and not strict on others. It's like, I think Lambert's flag's got a Z-Man plastic, bag attached to it. So it's like, okay,
You
well,
would think it, and that's been like 2.5 years that he's
oh
had
yeah,
that on there. You,
uh,
you would think like, hey, Lambert,
got some
you
staying
you,
power.
you
Yeah,
only you only won like $35,000 that weekend that became popular on that thing. You think you'd be like, yo, somebody hook me up with a correct flag,
yeah.
but
That's
to,
that's that
to each
that,
their
suit,
own.
that suits his alternative style of how he goes about his business. So
Yeah, I like it. It's wide open. It's not quite Wreck It Ralph, but it's like a Polio Pete scenario.
yeah. Well, we got
But
about 15 minutes or so left. Do you want to talk about kind of where we together have gone this year?
yeah,
And
absolutely. We
I
we
just
we can
I
tell a
made
couple stories too while we're at it.
yeah, I made some notes. We went went to Harris, which was a shortened event for us, and I know. Got to know Ewing Minor a little bit. He stayed with us a couple times this year. I didn't know him that well, and he's been a lot of fun. But the story with you guys at Harris fishing next to each other, and he would catch a
Yo,
21, and
hold on, hold on.
you'd catch a 14 or 15 or 12.
We're taking an official timeout
All right,
because
is that off limits?
that that event drove me it drove me off the deep end. Um, B, I'm pretty sure I killed one of those fish because I lost my mind and slung it, and threw it 9 miles away because we dealt like you said we doubled twice. Ewing caught 21s both times, and my fish were a 12 and change and a 14 and change, and we're fishing the same spot. When I mean we're fishing the same spot, our boats touched a couple times that day where he had a 360, I had a 180. The wind's blowing 100 mile an hour, and I'm just beside myself trying to stay where we need to stay at. And while we're talking about that event, that was one of my absolute pet peeves, I think, that drove me nuts this year too, is that information rule. And
Right.
it wasn't like a real big issue, right? It's like, okay, information rule, it's fair. But I'm sitting there right beside Ewing. We can't talk. That's one of my better friends, like, one of my top 5 friends, period. And all my friends are basically in fishing, kayak fishing. So, we all travel together. And Ewing is one of my absolute favorite best friends. He went on vacation with my family over Christmas, right? So me and Ewing are close, and we're staying. Did he stay in the same house with us for that event?
Not at
No.
Harris. Yeah.
So, but we're close. We're talking every day. He had told me about the spot, and I went and looked at it, caught some fish off of it, and we decide, hey, we're both going to go to that spot. That's kind of the A spot. He had spent a bunch of time down there for college events, and we wind up there. And last thing is like, hey, good luck. Hope we both wreck them. We can't talk. They're being real strict on the rules. That was the big thing this year. And I struggle the whole day. I had mid 70s, maybe upper 70s at best. Ewing sets the tournament record, 108 inches, and I'm basically there for the entire thing, right beside him, throwing the same bait. And when I mean throwing the same bait, we are throwing the same bait. We've got the same trailers. I ran out of trailers and had him pick some up from the dugout bait and tackle on his way down to Florida. We are throwing the same bait. And I'm beside myself. I give up. I'm like, you know what? I'm going somewhere else. I go to my second spot. I get to this spot, big flat. The guy in second place is in that spot. I had the best 2 spots picked out on the whole lake, and I'm in like 100th out of 200 people on day one. And I'm beside myself. And I'm like, well, at least I don't have to worry about anything. At least I did the right thing. I didn't ask Ewing. We didn't contact each other. And I got accused that afternoon of basically breaking an information rule for telling somebody that Ewing had caught those fish after they were already posted. And it's like, well, what in the world? Let's take a time out here and see. And now that we're halfway through the year, we can talk to each other on the water. That rule's been changed and kind of nullified and went back to normal. And I
Well,
think that,
the problem with that rule to start with, and we talked about it, when they made the announcement, is it's impossible to enforce. And you know, I like communicating with other anglers, not to try to determine information on, what's working. It's, Lambert typically would call me, how you doing? I'd call him, how you doing? We rarely are fishing in the same area. If he says, hey, I'm wrecking him, I'm not getting in the truck and going where he's at, and he's not doing the same thing, So
yeah,
it was just a dumb rule, and it was a poor decision when they made some really good decisions. And I think they realized it, and and we've talked this, and kudos to them for kind of taking the foot off the gas on that, because effectively it's all about accusations, and it's going to be angler A saying, oh, angler B sent angler C a text, angler C sent angler D and C, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's okay at 4 o'clock to go back to your condo and say, hey, I launched at this ramp. I threw these 3 baits and I caught, what you see posted on Tourney X. So it was it's a stupid rule. Hey, what do you think? You think it's stupid too, don't you, B? I know that's right.
so I think that was one of the most frustrating things. I've always been super super all in. Push the chips all in with the whole BOS series since it started, and you know there's been a few things here and there where it's benefit of the doubt where you give that to them. And like I said, they're the original trail that kind of made this super high end where it felt professional. And this year, you can kind of see it in attendance. They kind of took a step back, and I think that's part of it. Where you have an overbearing of rules to kind of start the season, and some things didn't get adjusted like we kind of wanted them to in the off season, and then halfway through the year, you start changing rules that in situations like mine, that could have made a really big difference on how my year played out. If I wasn't a person, wasn't an angler that spent a lot of time fishing a lot of events, and that was one of my, say, 4 or 5 events in my best 4, who's to say Ewing, what the difference was, it turned out Ewing was letting it fall and they were eating it when the jackhammer wasn't moving. And I throw a thunder cricket bladed jig jackhammer a lot. That's one of my favorite things to throw. And he was just catching them when the it wasn't moving. And you know how easy that would have been to be like, "Yo, Ewing, what's the deal here?" But given the situation, I didn't, because of the new rules. And that would have been, that could have, who's to say I couldn't drop 100 inches on that situation as well? And it's fishing, and you can't look at it like that. That's just, a bad way. You'll spend your entire time traveling and thinking, oh, if I'd have done this, I'd have done this. But that drove me nuts. That absolutely, it bothered me for a while. And it was almost like, to us, the rule got changed after somebody on stage literally went, "Oh, well, I told so and so I can hand them this, and I handed them this so they could get their limit." And there's somebody else that was sitting there. It's like, really? Like, how is that fair? But it's not. And then it comes out that the rule's been changed halfway through the year because no one wanted to deal with the issue.
Well, and the problem is, even if you would have done something that was a legitimate breach of the rules, which you didn't, and in the times you found yourself in those situations, you picked up the phone and you called the director and said, "Hey, I think I've, may have fished somewhere I shouldn't have fished because I didn't see a sign or whatever. What can we do about it?" And that
Yeah.
happens, and it's happened to
That
multiple
was exactly
people.
what happened at Wolf and Fox.
Yeah.
We skipped. We showed up, got our board checked, got our IDs, and essentially skipped the captain's meeting and went and watched the Green Bay Packers preseason game. Me and Eric. We actually, one of the random road dog things we did. And I fished in a cheesehead that weekend, which was I don't know. I still get cracked up about that. I should have grabbed that. I should have worn that tonight. But that's
We
the
did just get back. We did just get back from Wisconsin. The only good thing about Wisconsin, we brought back about 6 cases of spotted cow beer.
That's that's the only decent
Only
thing
good
in
thing.
all of Wisconsin. That and some cheese curds, and we didn't even have cheese curds.
Yeah, we
But
did. At the Milwaukee joint, we did.
oh, that's right. We had cheese curd appetizer.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'll be the first to admit, no matter what it is, hey, I did something stupid, because you know what? I do stupid things. I'm Wreck-It Ralph. It's one of those things. If you fish enough events, you're going to miss check-ins. You're going to break rules accidentally. That's part of it. And I'll be the first to admit, hey, when I saw that at Wolf and Fox River, and the reason I mentioned not going to the staying for the whole captain's meeting, AJ said apparently in the captain's meeting that I wasn't there for, "Hey, you need to stay away from this dam. There's some funky signage." So I get up there and fish up one side of it. There's no signs. I get up closer to the dam. The dam has a sign that says "Stay back 300 feet." I stay back 300 feet. Everything's fine and dandy. I come back down the other side, and there's a sign covered up by trees that say "Do not fish past this point." Well, to me, I was like, you know what? I don't know if it's this side on the lock or if this side that I fished on. And I just called AJ and said, "Hey, here's where I'm at. Here's the sign I saw. Here's the sign that I just discovered." And, luckily it didn't make too big of a difference on my season. It probably would have obviously helped a little bit, because I didn't end up getting a limit on day one and I had to kind of scramble. But, in the end, I don't regret that. If that made a difference of me finishing fifth in AOY at the end of the season, or third in AOY and going to Worlds, I wouldn't change that, because I would want each and every person to do the exact same thing the way it was handled, as I think it should have been, right? So, in situations like that, that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask other anglers to do. That's all you can do yourself. It's just
Well, I think that the vast majority of the anglers, it's very similar to golf, and there being kind of an honor system. Ain't nobody watching you play golf, and if you want to improve your lie, or do something you're not supposed to do, you got to live with that yourself. So it's almost like a self-reporting type scenario. But I do think when you try to enforce rules that is strictly hearsay, I mean, there's absolutely no way that you could prove that somebody was communicating with one another unless you confiscated their phone records and were able to record the phone conversations that they had, or the text messages that they sent to one another. And and good luck decoding some of that stuff, in group
Yeah.
texts, Snapchats, and all the stuff that's utilized. Um, but the for me, the fishing highlights for this season. I'd never been to Caddo, and I didn't have a
Is
particular.
that not one of the most special places ever? That
You know,
place blows my mind every time I go down there.
my two favorite fisheries, from traveling, are Seminole and Susky, in probably reverse order. And just great places to fish, incredibly diverse. Obviously, love rivers, and Susky's a special river. But Caddo, I had a poor Saturday and had a really good Sunday. And if I'd have done what I did Sunday on Saturday, I probably would have had a little better tournament. But that was one of those deals we just drove down there and fished. And that's we've done that a couple of times. And I'm not a big practice guy. I'm not a big hang your hat on fish or off fish. I
We
think
talking about practice.
yeah, that's right. I'm kind of like Iverson. It's like I'm all about the actual when the buzzer sounds, and I usually do.
Eric is big on a Friday rest day. Let's just go ahead and get that out there. There's no one appreciates a Friday rest day quite like hashtag pro.
There's two things I like when we travel, and they're both difficult to do unless you get off to a real early start as far as when you travel somewhere. And I love to have a sit down breakfast, and I do like to take, like, when I've made TOC a couple times. And the first time Jordan and I went out to Arkansas at Ouachita, and that was great. Had a good finish. We both cashed. I think he was fifth and I was seventh, and we just had a great time. And we literally, what did we do? We almost made that a. Where did we go before then? Or we just got down there? I mean, we had the whole week.
We got down there the whole week. We spent the whole week down there. I think we got down there and spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday looking
And we
around
played
and
golf
kind of
on
practicing.
Friday
And we played golf on
in Hot
Friday
Springs. Yeah,
in
and there
Hot
nobody could
Springs.
believe that we played golf Friday. And it was like, after the first day of practice, it was one of the times where I was comfortable with
Yeah.
what we needed to do. And
We
it,
showed up, put in, threw crankbaits, and everywhere we went, we caught fish for basically 4 days. I mean, there was nowhere we
well,
went that we did.
the
There might
what
have been one place
well,
when
no,
the
well,
where the
what
water was muddy.
well what resonated with me, and you'll remember this when I say it, is that place we put in. You caught fish right away. We were getting some good bites cranking. And I turned the corner and I was like, what is all that in the water? And that's when we found that standing timber.
Ooh,
And I was like,
that was the
I said,
damn.
Jordan, I said, this is what we need to look for. And we found, I think it was called Little Fur. You remember that? Was it called Little Fur?
Yeah, we literally just drove around to all the boat ramps and looked for wherever had the
And
most standing
it
timber,
was
and then we were done.
it was littered. And like on Saturday, Jordan went left and I went right. And on Sunday, I went right and Jordan went left. And we just covered water and hit those trees.
We
And
just made 2 reverse loops and then
yeah,
just and it was there was it was that was a special place. That was one of the first times where I went to a big national tournament and felt like, oh, you know what? Like I can do this.
yeah,
It felt like I, had a place with this because that was my best national finish for any event. I made the TOC that year from 3-8. Well, actually, that was before they did points. So it was just eighth place finish from Gunnersville. I guess I got a roll down or whatever it was. But regardless, I had 3 eighth place finishes that year in national events and was feeling pretty good about myself. But the fifth at TOC and showing up and had never been there before was the kicker for me, because the other events were Gunnersville, Chickamauga, and Kentucky Lake on the Tennessee River. And, it felt like I was still fishing at home, essentially. So to go to Arkansas and spend a few days down there, it felt um, it felt like I had found a place. It legitimized what I was trying to do in a kayak.
well, well, I think this week when we were in Wisconsin, somebody posted on KBN. Would you rather fish a Bassmaster Kayak American Classic Championship, or would you rather fish a TOC? And the voting kind of came in a little skewed towards bass. And it's like, for me, if you fish the TOC, and I've been lucky enough to fish two of them, what people don't realize is, you know, I like my chances against a smaller field, even though there's 50 hammers, or this year 60 hammers within that field. and you could argue that anybody within that 60 roster could win at Chick. You know, and the other thing is, you know, compared to 150 or 200 people practicing for that event, I don't think the fishery is as beat up as it is at TOC. And it's
Yeah.
and Hobie truly treats you special with the swag you get, with just the fact that you're there, and you know
I think I think it
and I fished in both, Jordan. I fished the Bassmaster Classic at Lake Russell, and honestly, you know, it was a joke comparative side by
yeah.
side. Now, that was before
For
Steve.
the first couple of years of that, the kayaks were a sideshow, straight up. There's no
Totally,
like, it
totally.
was not a kayak classic. It was a kayak tournament that was going on the same time the classic was. It was no kayak classic. It was a circus.
Yeah, and you know, and I felt like they overstated. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. You know, phenomenal local guy, Joby Berry, fished Lake Russell, first big tournament, you know, out of town he fished, came in 8th place. The entry fee was $400. And, you know, that's healthy. It's, you know, incredibly healthy to begin with.
That's a lot of doll hairs.
That's low doll hairs. And he came in 8th place, and I think he won 500. So, you know, first,
Doesn't even pay for his trip
then he
at
paid for
all.
trip. You know, and I think first place, you know, was a legit 20 grand, but second was two. You know,
Yeah.
so it dropped.
And
You
that's one
know,
of the things that this off season, when people started talking about it, hey, what do you think should be changed? And Bass with Steve-O changed it to where less people got paid. They're paying more money out and less people get paid. So you can actually, if you do cash, you actually make a little bit of money. And one of the complaints with Hobie this year is that they did the complete opposite. They literally went from having a solid payout, which most people would agree you could make a little money, finish in the top 10%, and they started paying 15%. And you know, there's a lot of factors that change a lot of these, but when you look at it, Bass grew in numbers this year, and Hobie has declined, and it's declined the further the year has went. And everybody knows I fish the Hobie, and I'm not hating on Hobie, but how when people are trying to sit down and figure out what's going on and trying to improve, how do the two complete opposite things switch? How does that happen? That still is like,
well,
I,
I've got two theories. One, you know, Hobie hung their hat on having 2 to 225 per event, and that was a pipe dream, not because of anything they did. It's just people can't do it. You know, it's expensive. You know, people started going back to work. People didn't have the flexibility they had, you know, during the COVID type stuff. And then, you know, we've talked about this, the fact that Bass allows motors has attracted, you know, the guys that don't want to fool with doing what you and I sometimes commit to do, like we did in Wisconsin. We did 8 miles into the wind in one of the biggest bodies of water as I've ever fished. And I mean,
and
you got lost for 2 hours, you know.
I did. I got stuck in a grass mat, which it you know, here's another interesting thing too. You know, they canceled one of our day ones at Santee Cooper for high winds, right? And I don't know what the exact winds were for that event, but it at Santee Cooper, there's probably a lot of places you can get out of the wind. I mean, it's a giant swamp, right? So, you know, we go to Seminole, and at one point during the Seminole day, I had a drive issue where I'd hit a stump on Seminole, which everybody that's been to Seminole has. I don't care what kayak you have, what bass boat you have, you're going to hit something on Seminole. And, you know, you got a 50-50 whether you end up broken. So I hit something and had a slight mechanical error in the drive, and I had to go into the current and into the wind to get back to my truck. And you know, at one point I called AJ and said, "Hey, you know, what are my options here if I can't get back? Am I just going to have to go to another ramp? Is, you know, I know Steve Fields is running around here taking pictures because I had seen him, and you know, it was, hey, you know, it's interesting how that works to where, um, you know, at what point do you call an event, right? And
Tough.
it's a fine line, and
It's a tough. It's an incredibly difficult decision. But I've fished two events that should have both been canceled. One was the Hobie at Watts Bar when it was 10 degrees, and one was at Lake Fork Mess that we did when it was 10 degrees. And neither one of those we should
And
have
I've got
never
an
fit.
honorable mention, for that too. Those are both just cold weather. There was another one, the very, very first Hobie BOS that was at
Shit.
Chickamauga when
That's
the
right. The
absolute
second, that's
crazy
the
flood happened.
flood. Yeah, that's three. You're right.
And by all means, like they were like I was leading after the first day of that one,
I
and
remember we ate breakfast and when we went to the ranch, we're
yeah,
like, they shouldn't fish. I mean, it
yeah.
was, it was, I'd never seen anything like that.
And you sit down and I could handle like, hey, we're not going to cancel any events if there's not a tornado or a lightning storm. You know what? Like I get it. We fished through the 100-year flood at Chickamauga in the very first Hobie. We fished in the Bassmaster event where I literally there's a video on my Facebook where I had to break ice to get to where I was fishing. That's crazy. And then you have the Watts Bar Hobie where it was in the single digits, and that was just as cold as could be. I mean, it was
That
nuts.
on the Watts Bar, Jordan, the morning on Sunday, I left my truck in the driveway with my rods in the back, just so I could hop the trailer that was in the garage and bust to the ramp. And that's when I put Lambert on the spot where he ended up winning it. And then I went somewhere else because he did well and I didn't. I only caught a couple fish, but I did something else that morning. My rods from the back of the truck in a covered bed were froze solid, and my first cast it didn't do anything. I was like, what in the world is wrong with my stuff? And the water temperature was probably 20 degrees warmer than the air temperature, and the only way you could get your rods and reels to work was to dip that in the water. I mean, it was terrible. Terrible.
It was miserable. And
Yes.
I went, I can accept that if, hey, the major kayak tournaments are not going to be canceled, point blank period. And then we get to an event like Santee Cooper this year where we cancel day one for wind. And so it's almost like you're prioritizing wind being more dangerous for kayaks. And I fully understand that, right? Like wind could be a really bad issue for a kayak, right? But if you look back and there's a Hobie event at what was it, Sam Rayburn 2 years ago, where Luke Arian was out there just getting blown around like crazy, and everyone, people were talking about
Well,
that, where he was just going through those rollers, and
Toledo Bend was a mess. The
that might have been the one I was thinking
Yeah,
of. Yeah,
Toledo Bend was dangerous. I mean, it was dangerous on Saturday.
and you almost wonder, and here's the issue, right? So, um, why is the difference? Why is that Santee Cooper event canceled? And you know, why of all the events that could have been canceled for one day or both days or postponed or whatever you want to say, and I almost wonder if outside influence wasn't an issue with canceling day one, because the local kayak club, which was Vinny and them, canceled their event. And I think that kind of put Hobie in a bad spot of, hey, do we still have an event or do we cancel an event? And I think that was one of the weirder instances of the whole season of we went all this time and people are asking me like I'm some guru, and I fished a lot of events, but I don't know every single thing that's going to happen. And people were texting, hey, what do you think is going to happen? And I'm like, I kept telling everybody, we're going to fish. We fished in 8 degrees. We broke ice. We fished in crazy floods. We fished in the wind at Toledo Bend the year before, and somehow we end up canceling that tournament. It's strange
Well,
to me, and I think that's
here's the thing for me. Like it's hard to be critical of somebody making a decision that's centered around safety. And I
oh
think
yeah,
about
absolutely.
and I think about Joe getting stuck in that damn
And the tile at
culvert.
Gunnersville, yeah,
And I mean that could have turned out really bad, and
yeah,
at some point something really bad is going to happen to someone simply because of the nature of what we do in practice or in an event, because they find themselves in a spot like that and they can't get out.
right.
And so again,
I
it's an enormously difficult deal because you've got the local community that said, hey, we're going to give you, whatever we give you, 15, 20, $30,000 to bring in, what do they call it? Heads and beds and
heads and beds, yeah.
heads and beds. And these guys, Steve O in particular, AJ in particular, have done a phenomenal job building relationships with these communities And the one thing that I will say is you feel welcome when you go to these places, and it's
Yeah, a lot of
because
the times there's city managers and Glenn Jacobs was here for the TOC and welcomed everybody. There's a lot of really important people that come out and talk to us at these cities, and it's an ordeal a lot of the times where they make a big deal out of it and make us feel welcome.
yeah.
And I don't want to be the guy that's complaining about whatever. I'm not going to complain that there's somebody errs on the side of safety, right? My question is, how does that one get canceled and some of the other ones don't? or
Well,
or or
it's a
or
it's a
or
it's
vice versa.
well, it's a fair question, and like if you remember the Watts Bar tournament, they didn't start until 9, and then the local dumbasses started at
I
7,
g-
and
I got my spot pirated. Do you want
you
to
got
talk
your
about
spot.
that?
Yeah, well,
I
that
got
was
my
kind of
spot pirated.
yeah, which you know, the again, the decision is difficult. It needs to be consistent. And I think that there's certainly some relevance to say, hey, a club that's as relevant as Vinny's club with as much participation as got, hey, we're not fishing. They're local. They know that world. They know that body of water. And you're sitting there and you're AJ. You're like, you know what? He's probably right. And if he's going to do it, I probably need to do it. And it turned out, I guess the weather wasn't as bad as the forecast, and everybody's like, well, shoot. And it's just like, if you're a kid wanting to know whether or not you're going to school on Tuesday because of snow, you're sitting there, let's go, I hope they cancel school. And then, it doesn't snow, or you're at school and it snows a foot, and, you're sliding around on
Yeah.
the bus going home. It's
It's easy to look back, you know what they say, hindsight's
Monday, yeah, Monday
2020,
morning
but
quarterback.
yeah. And that's I don't want to be the guy that's complaining about that situation, but
and
if
and
we err
the
on the
and
if we
here's
err on the side of caution, that there shouldn't be anybody complaining, right?
But here's the other thing that's hard for other people to get their arms around is there's very few people seeing what we've seen.
Right.
We fish somewhat of a full schedule, and we've been a part of some weather events that you're like, golly, this is not, you know, there's a rare occurrence fishing where, in Wisconsin, you're like, man, I might need to get you to come get me somewhere else because I don't know if I can get back to the ramp, and that's not normal, and
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, yeah, I'm like, what, just let me know what we need to do. And so, um, you know, I think for people that don't fish, that hasn't fished as many events as we have, it's really hard for them to understand what we've seen, and you've got such a body of work to compare those decisions to. The one that stands out to me was Fork. We get to our VRBO and everything was froze solid. You remember we caught.
Texas is not built to handle cold like
No,
that. We we
no.
we got lucky. We got a hold of a couple heaters and we pulled kayaks in the garage. And
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't for that fireplace in our house, we would have just about froze to death because it was cold with the fireplace going.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that was an event. We got there early enough to practice a couple of days. We didn't leave the house.
Did not
I
leave the
think we,
house.
we went out one day. You flew the drone a little bit. And we threw
I
snowballs at each
I
other.
literally I literally took the drone. I had a drone for this season to look around to help me practice, right? Because I like driving around. I like looking at things. It made sense to me, right? So that's the first event I'm taking the drone for practical use, try to apply my new drone aerial skills. And all I did with that drone was literally we would go to a boat ramp and the ice would be completely covered in front of the ramp and I would fly the drone out to see how far the ice was covering. That was the intent of my first drone usage to pre-fish with a drone.
Well, to put a bow on this episode, I will go on record and say if it is drivable, flyable, navigatable, then this guy can figure it out and figure it out
Operational.
very, very quickly, and for the most part, pretty proficient. I mean,
If it's got a wheel, joysticks,
yeah,
or whatever,
he'll
put
figure
on put on an
figure
app
it
with the
out.
drone. I will fly it, drive it, or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
as long as my feet are on the ground or I'm close to the ground because I don't do heights.
yeah.
That's why I'm not a pilot.
That's right. But you could
Uh,
be. More than
I,
likely.
I could be. You put me
That's
in a simulator, and we'll see how much I like flying.
there you
Somebody
go.
out there get me a flight simulator. I want to fly that thing.
That's right.
So, I'm gonna try to get like a bunch of questions. I always like doing podcasts where somebody does a bunch of questions at the end. And
Yeah.
you know what? I don't know if I have particularly any like, you know, you mentioned earlier your top three places. I was gonna bring that up. Like you said, what was it? Susquehanna, Seminole,
Caddo,
and
not
Caddo. You
not
know,
being Caddo, I got probably more enjoyment. Now, the New York trip
where's
was,
somewhere you want to go?
you know, gosh, I just ran into a guy that's a good fisherman, older gentleman at the gym, and he's taking his grandson to one of those deals up in Canada that you go catching and you just fly in on a, one of those, I don't know what you call them, the biplanes or whatever that float.
Little
You
float
know,
planes.
yeah. And they've got, basically a fish camp set up there, and the smallmouth. You probably get tired of catching them, and then you'll probably try to catch a pike or walleye or whatever else. And it's just those type fisheries that are that way. I mean, probably it's been too long since we've gone and chased redfish in Venice.
You
I
know
mean,
what I want to do? That you mentioned that I actually sent a text message probably in the last week, right? I want to go, and I reached out to a couple guys. I want to go and fish a redfish tournament.
now that would be, that's a win regardless. That's a win regardless. And some of those saltwater guys we've met are super nice. Matt down there that we stayed at his VRBO.
That's one of the people I reached out to.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get us a trip down there after the season ends because they have saltwater
don't
tournaments,
don't
in
don't
the
reach
winter.
don't reach out to Matthew Scotts because he don't know shit about redfish or flounder or trout.
That is a whole nother road dog story.
Yeah,
Matt Scotch sent us on a wild goose chase, and I'm not gonna burn a spot because he swears him down that's a good spot, and I've even back checked him, and other people said that was a good spot.
not that day.
So it was not that day. We showed up to where the access point was, and there was no water there. And when I mean there was no water there was 2 inches of water there in a place that we were supposed to launch kayaks with the trailer. So the tides got us, even though I asked them specifically,
And I think
Scotch, you
it
still
was. I
owe us a
think it
redfish
was.
trip, but
It was. Still proximity and time close enough to where the deep freeze in Texas really screwed up the ecosystem.
yeah,
You remember when we were at Fork and they were like,
yeah.
it froze and that this was solid ice, and the fishery was, I don't
Yeah,
think.
that was the first time we went to Fork, right? We
Yeah,
were supposed
which
to spend a week down there
yeah,
between what was
broke
it,
a
Broken
bow.
Bow? Yeah,
Yep,
Broken. We did the Hobie and Broken Bow, and then drove straight to the what was it, Bassmaster at Fork.
yep, yep.
And we were just, it was post freeze
That's
by a
one of the
week maybe.
tournaments that I actually did better than you, and you kept seeing me catch fish, and you got very frustrated.
That is, there's a lot of places people hear me, people give me a hard time and say I hate fishing everywhere. They don't know why like I travel and fish so much because everybody knows like, oh, Jordan hates so and so. I hate Chick, but I understand why people want to go to Chick, right? I hate Fork, and I understand why people want to go there because there's big fish, and I get it, right? I'm not oblivious, right? Fork is one of those places that has treated me like crap both times, uh, 2 or 3 times or whatever we went out there now. I, Fork has treated me awful, but it's treated my friends well when we went down there and guys I've stayed with. So I get the interest with Fork. Now Mississippi River, on the other hand, I hate that place, and I don't know why we go there. But that's
Yeah,
going to be
I'm,
another
I'm,
10 minutes of me on a ramble.
yeah, I'm second guessing that decision myself. However, I sent Ewing a message about catching those smallmouth on the Holston on Monday, and he goes, see, it's not the Mississippi River. You can still fish. He said it's the
Yeah,
Mississippi. It's not you. And I was like, well, I sure hope so. He said that's why I
I
didn't go. And I'm like, when
yeah,
somebody like that
just
says they didn't go, I'm
just
like,
not a fan, honestly.
yeah.
That whole area, and I'm going to catch some flack for that, but
You know what
that's a terrible place to have an event.
to me, talking to Jay, well, that stayed with us that did well, and talking to other people and what they did. I really feel like that's a place where you almost have to spend some time practicing, and you got to find
It's it's
some
it's a
kind of
magic
back.
spot.
You got
It's
to
a
find
magic spot
you
place,
got to find
man.
a backwater area that's got some reasonable fish in it. and stay there,
And there were guys that launched with us that went to a spot and said they caught 60 fish, 50 fish, basically making the exact same cast, and they ate every single thing that they threw in there.
yeah,
And I just for whatever reason, that place, on the Tennessee River and down south, a lot of times if there's a lot of fish around, you'll catch the biggest one first and then just kind of work your way down through smaller fish. And that place, it doesn't seem to matter. You might catch 58-inch fish and then randomly catch a 17 and then catch 10 more 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch fish. And to me, that does not, I don't know, that's one of those situations where if you have a trail that's trying to be high end national traveling series, and I don't think that ever happens. And here's the biggest factor, right? So, until you have an entire year's buy-in where you're fishing against the same 100 or 150 or 200 people the whole year, it's not a professional traveling series. It's basically a open casual series
it's
that
a
just has a
derby.
bunch of money. Yeah,
It,
it
it's a
is.
derby,
There's neither one's a wrong answer, right? It's
right?
just what you prefer. And I think there's people that want this to be professional, and it doesn't become professional until you have the same, you're fishing against the same guys. There's not guys cherry picking whatever. And I think half the reason we go to lacrosse is just to silence the midwestern crowd of that wants an event in their neck of the woods. And it's impossible to show up to lacrosse if you've never been there and find a pattern. I personally like to go places and fish patterns, and that's not a place where you go and fish a pattern. You go and fish the same hole every year because we always go to lacrosse basically within 2 or 3 weeks of each other or a month of each other, no matter it's bass or Hobie or what. And people fish the exact same spot every time, it seems like.
Well, it's it's a catch 22. You figure if you have that event somewhere, in the southeast in the same time of the year, and you incorporate some moving water, you probably have a better turnout, and you're going to catch some quality smallmouth down here. Going up north to fish for largemouth that are 15 inches is not, something exciting for me. Where you could go up to, I mean, heck,
At
Caillou,
least when we went to Cayuga, there were
you
big
caught
fish
some quality
everywhere.
fish everywhere.
Everywhere. There were big fish everywhere.
And same thing at there's probably better options for more quality fish, but the flip side of that is you catch the most inches, you win. And it doesn't matter if it's 108 each day
It's
or
it's it's
80
all
each day.
fair, ain't it? It's all fair
Well,
game.
yeah. When the bell rings, I mean, you're fishing against yourself, and you're fishing against whoever happens to sign up in that event. And the one that blew my mind, is, and I even reached out to AJ and told him how much I enjoyed it. Is I thought the New River was fantastic. Now, I was one of the few people to catch a big fish in practice, and had a reasonable tournament. They were kind of far and few between in the actual event, but to
The
me,
new the new river has potential.
has huge potential, and,
It has
and
huge potential in a couple years. It's just like Kentucky Lake right now, right? So we just went there and there were, a blue million, 14, 15-inch fish at Kentucky Lake, and there's a bunch of 12 and 13-inch fish at New River. That's got potential. I understand how that was a really good fishery. I understand how it will be a really good fishery. We just didn't get it at 100% great time.
well,
I
the local club that had a tournament adjacent to Hobie, but not in Hobie boundaries, the
Yeah,
numbers were, I think with
absurd. There was
like
a bunch
high
bunch
80s and
over 90s.
90s,
Yeah.
and I mean they caught some really good fish, and they're there. Um, but again,
But I don't think New River could handle the pressure, right? I would be really happy seeing a TOC on the New River because you
now
don't have
that would
nearly the
be
amount of heathens out there that don't know how to practice.
well, and that's yeah, I mean, the fact that they had the TSC here and incorporated the Holston and French Broad, you could certainly argue you could have it at the New or Susky, or somewhere there's moving water. Um, and again, if you've been fortunate enough to fish one of those, you realize that it's a little different animal. Them going from 2 days to 3 days is an interesting change that really weeds out just kind of getting lucky for a couple of days. You got to really manage fish and maybe do what you do a lot and bounce from spot to spot, depending on what you've got going on. But, I, I think that you've got a super good leader in Steve, and even at the regional level with Daniel Davis on the bass side, those are fun, and Daniel's great. They truly want you to have a good experience. And I think AJ is straight laced. He's super fair. He's excellent at what he's challenged to do, as is Steve. So you've got two well run outfits that I think will continue to make the efforts to make them better. And we're not always going to buy into what they're trying to do,
Yeah.
but I think
As
it's
long as I can follow a thought process of what they're trying to do, and I can get on board with connecting the dots. Hey, we're going from this to this, and this is why. I
yeah.
I can by all means give that a shot, right?
Yeah,
I can be down with that.
and I think it again, it boils down to you're a little different because you're looking to compete and you're looking to fish something pretty much every weekend. Others who are cherry picking events that suit them, it becomes a choice, and they are making a, a informed decision on where and why they want to fish. And if there's two tournaments that they can't fish them both, and one's a bass and they've got a motor, and one's a Hobie and they don't, and this fishery might be a little more attractive, maybe they go this route. I like the fact that there's more choices than there used to be, but it would be phenomenal to have some type of a you know year-end championship to take the top guys in bass and the top guys in Hobie and bring them together and have some kind of Super Bowl of kayak fishing. I mean, there's a
Like
lot
an
of
invitation only event for everybody.
you
What a
know
concept.
well, not for everybody. I mean,
Well, you know what I mean, like for
yeah,
everybody that's fishing the event,
yeah.
I've made that comment a couple times. That's why I had that reaction of
Well,
you know
I think you've got probably a dozen guys, girls on both sides of that aisle that are loyal to one trail or not, and that's kind of what they do. You've got people that mix and match, and they fish where they want when they want. I think that you've got the potential with the fact that these guys are friendly with one another, understand that certain things are for the greater good. That we've always talked about it from a local perspective. I mean, there's really nothing you can't do within the cast rules as far as what you do in a given tournament. And
yeah,
so it's like, I would say that, if there was one knock against the community, is the lack of creativity when it comes to, you know, deeming an angler of the year. And it's funny, Jeff and Lambert doing the rankings when the season's over, and that's always exciting. Everybody kind of you know has an opinion on how those all play out, but it's like, what if you had one event that included KBF, Bass, and the Hobie guys, and it was 40 deep or 50 deep or 20 deep. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And that might be something that you could actually sell to the outdoor channel and maybe get something legitimately televised instead of trying to do.
And you know what would be really cool to take the concept that what was the goofy thing I fished last year?
Was the team stuff,
No,
what they call it.
the team thing where you would live. I
Yeah,
can't think of the
yeah,
name of it.
yeah.
I enjoyed fishing. Like I joke around and say that was the goofy thing because I say that because a lot of people didn't take that serious, but I had a lot of fun doing that, and here's why.
Well, y'all had a good
Um,
team. Y'all had a
yeah,
good
we had a good team.
team.
Shout out Coosa Kingfishers, kaka kaka. Um, Joe mentions that every time I see him. Coosa Kingfisher. We had a great team, but not the team aspect, but what they did really cool. And they were, essentially kind of before their, time. They were the first one to do this. And I think this comes around and actually becomes a thing at some point, because this is how you would market it. And from a television standpoint, just the same way we sit and watch MLF and Bassmaster Live, where you can have it where there is a camera in your kayak to where people can watch it. And I think they had a lot of potential with what they did. And I can't, um, K, K, KF,
KFL.
KFL, thank you,
KFL.
KFL. KFL had a lot of really great ideas, that has a lot of potential, and that could be, you know, using some of those bricks to do something and build something else with, to where people can build interest. I think that could definitely be an option in the future, to have something where you only have, like a TOC where you have 50 guys or whatever, and have that to where a few guys are supposed to live stream, but you run into issues with service and all that kind of things, which is, kind of your snafus with that. But, that's on the table for something that, I would like to see, in the future, that I think actually has potential. But we're over an hour and a half. I joked around that we were going to run for an hour, and we kind of got on a roll there about an hour, and spent the last 30 minutes really, really kind of diving into things that we were
It's past my
making strides with.
it's past my bedtime.
I know it's 10 o'clock. I'm aware. I don't think you had your afternoon nap today, did you?
I had
But
two today,
two today.
mid morning and an afternoon nap.
So I think I'm gonna have my road dog question is this at the end of the show, is right. I've been thinking about it this whole time. You could see the gears turning, the mullet getting greasy where I'm thinking, and my head's turning. Who, Eric Thomason, #pro, would you recommend going on a road trip with, or someone you would like to go on a road trip on a tournament with?
who that I haven't been on, or that I have
That you either would recommend somebody else go on a trip with, or um or to go on that you haven't went with. If you were going to go to Florida or New York or something like that, is there somebody you would want to go that you haven't with?
I mean, truth be told, the groups that we've, you know, the core group is pretty solid, and
Yeah.
I'd include Pro Neighbor and Matt, kind of as our core group. Um, Sisto is just off the reservation.
For anybody
Fun.
that has not shared a house with Sisto, that is one of the most interesting human beings on the entire planet. That's not even kayak fishing. That's one of the most interesting humans I've ever been around ever.
You know, the cool, I would say somebody that I think I could travel with and room with and get along with and not have to worry about it. And he's basically my age, and he's just kind of gotten into this. Is probably Abby.
Yeah.
Abby's. I mean, he's a country music singer. He's a good dude. He's laid back. We've gotten to know each other. I didn't know Jay particularly well until we stayed with Jay this weekend, and that was an education and bourbon and other stuff. And he's an outstanding fisherman and a super nice guy. Um, you know, um, I think it'd
And
be
that was
great.
actually the first time I've ever roomed with Jay. I've
I
known
think
Jay a while.
I think it'd be great to get AJ on a road trip. AJ, you don't get to you only see kind of one side of AJ, because AJ
Yeah.
is in a he's kind of in a spotlight, and he can't he's doing his job the right way. But I think
Yeah.
AJ, I mean, we've done some floats and stuff with him. He's a lot of fun, and um, but
I like the Abby comment. I don't I've not stayed with Abby.
Abby makes the mistake of staying with Pendergraft and Lambert. There's a list I would not go on a road trip with. There's a longer
Yeah.
list of who I wouldn't go on with.
I've
Who I would.
I've stayed with a lot of people, and that's the benefit of fishing a lot of events. I've slept in my truck a lot, and I've stayed with a lot of different people, and I've about the only thing that I don't want to do anymore is stay in just a really big house. and there's a lot of people, I like and I get along with. There comes a certain time where, if I have, you know this as well as anybody, if I don't have a good day on the water or have a good practice day, practice is a little more laid back. But if I have a bad day one and I've got to stay for day two, I don't want to be around anybody. And that's, whether I'm mad or not, I get kind of lost in my thoughts, and I'll show up and take a shower and lay down and just kind of be in my own little world. And I'll show up back up when the steaks are made and eat dinner, and I kind of get lost again and just kind of my own little world, because I don't like being around a lot of people if things kind of don't go according to plan in my head. And that's, my own kind of weird quirk. But um
I think, truth be told, if I've got my own room, as far as staying with other people, I don't have a major issue with it. The thing that you run into that, people don't think about when you're staying with, several people is, most everybody's got, a trailer, a truck, and it's like, okay, where's all these people park? And, like when that place we stayed at in Caddo, I mean, that was kind of a high rise, that was not really kind of how it was advertised. Remember, we had to kind of park behind that gate, and it was a little sketchy
yeah,
getting in and
that
out of
was a
there.
mess.
That was fairly much a mess, and probably would have got robbed if we weren't inside the inside the compound.
That was that was a
Yeah,
questionable
that's not
Airbnb, to say the
one of my
least.
better bookings.
That might have been another Evolve Airbnb.
It was. I mean, like I said, it was falsely advertised because the picture didn't do. I mean, the place was nice,
Yeah.
inside, outside of going up 17 flights of steps, but yeah, I mean, the cool thing is kind of like you. I'm fortunate, because I've been around this earth quite a bit longer than you. But it's like I've got great friends. I've always had great friends, but I've made some phenomenal friends within this industry. Kent Vanover, I would have never met. You would have never met. Lambert, pro neighbor, we're neighbors. He's gotten more into this kayak thing. Never would have probably, gotten to know Matt, and Matt's a good dude. Sisto, Abby. I mean, there's just it's a pretty, all in all, it's a pretty good group of people. Even though our goals kind of beat the brains out of each other when we get the chance to do it. But it's like if I'm the leader in the clubhouse, in the house, everybody wants to see me do well on Sunday. We're all kind of
Yeah.
cheering for one another, one way or the other.
And
Um,
that's a kayak fishing thing. It
it
really
is,
is.
it is. It is, because it's hard. People don't realize how difficult it is, and you can do a lot of things right and it not pan out. You can do a lot of things wrong and end up having 85 inches and wonder, like, how did that happen? And I think the longer you do it, the more things happen that you've had a similar experience. I was talking to Abby, and I think he dropped a rod in the water with a fish on it. And I was like, I did that doing a river float, and it went down. It went down in this eddy on the Big Pigeon. I was with Kent, and we split an island. He went left, and I went right, and I hooked one right before this island, and there was a deep spot, and I hit the island, and it nearly threw me out of the kayak, and I dropped my rod, and that fish drug it into that heavy, deep current, and I could see my rod float, but it was 3 feet under the water, so I just jumped in after it, get it, and the fish is still on. And I'm like, what are the odds of that fish, like a 17-inch smallmouth? I'm like, what are the odds of that fish being on?
And sometimes you'll hook a fish and get it halfway to the boat, and the hook just comes out. It's like
I
the
know.
fish never had it in its mouth.
It's like, how does this happen? But, I think you've heard me say this about golf. I think, in golf, you get just as many good bounces as you do bad bounces over the course of your golfing career. I think fishing is the same way. When I was fishing Monday at, at, um, at the
On
Holston,
Holston,
that
yeah.
first 20 and a quarter, when I called you and told you I called a good one, caught it in heavy current. It's always challenging to get one in the net. And and it was questionable, it could have gone out of the net easily because about half its head was out and half was in. Lure comes out, fish drops in the net. I was like, okay, that's a good one. And then the second 20 and a quarter I caught, it had 6 hooks in it and was pulling drag, and was not playing nice at all, but it wasn't coming off. I could have probably boat flipped it and been just fine, but some days those neither one of those fish get in a boat.
Oh, that's 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, dog, I appreciate you coming on. First guest, I couldn't ask for any first guest couldn't ask for anybody better to come on and talk a little fishing. And obviously, I couldn't do this without a lot of help. So I just
Who you got on the docket for guest number 2? Have you thought that far out yet?
there's a few people I definitely want to have. I'm not gonna jinx anything. I don't know what order. There's a couple
Not going to
people
disclose anything.
one of the people that I know said he wanted to come on that I don't think he's been on any major podcast or anything is Jim Ware.
Oh, okay.
One of my road dog buddies that sleeps in his car, and we've eaten a lot of fantastic meals and non-fantastic towns together. So Jim said he would be interested when I talked to him the last time we stayed together at Gunnersville a couple weeks ago. So I don't know if Jim will be the next one, but Jim's on the docket. So
I got you.
It's there's no shortage of people to talk to in this.
I don't know Jim incredibly well, but I talked to him on the phone. I was having issues with my 360 drive. I mean, he was just like, do this, do this, do this, do that, do this, do this, do this. Call me and let me know. I mean, he's just not.
Yeah,
I didn't spend
Jim's
much time
good.
with it, but and I know just looking at his social media. He's kind of, I kind of put myself in that category. He's got a knack for catching big ones. I mean, he tends to
Yeah.
catch big ones, and I like to see people catch big ones. So good
Yeah.
choice.
Well, I appreciate you. I'm
You
gonna
got it.
figure out how to play us out of here
You got it.
and get this squared away. So I appreciate you.
You got it, man. We'll see you.
Thanks. Bye bye. And shout out to Eric for coming on here. I'm gonna wrap us up here shortly, but like I said, there's a lot of people I appreciate for helping us out. You know, this is incredible. This is really exciting. I've had a lot of fun getting this together. Hopefully we've got an intro and outro kind of a little different coming up. I've got Abby possibly wanting to do something with trying to get us an intro song together that kind of fits my road dog style. And obviously I'm going to spend more time kind of learning how to work all this whole system. So really excited. I can't wait to see, and show you guys what all we're going to do with this. But for now, episode 1, Road Dog is out.